Maria Santos had always been invisible at St. Mary's General Hospital, and that's exactly how she wanted it. For 8 years, she'd mopped the same floors, emptied the same trash bins, and cleaned the same blood-stained gurneys with hands that moved with surgical precision nobody else seemed to notice. But when armed gunmen stormed through the emergency room doors on that rainy Tuesday night, the quiet janitor would reveal skills that could only belong to someone trained to kill and save lives in equal measure. The fluorescent lights of St. Mary's General Hospital cast their familiar harsh glow across the polished linoleum floors as Maria Santos pushed her cleaning cart down the corridor. It was 11:47 p.m., deep into the night shift that had become her sanctuary for nearly a decade. The hospital at this hour was a different world, quieter, more intimate, where the drama of day-shift medicine gave way to the steady rhythm of overnight healing. Maria moved with the practiced efficiency of someone who had walked these halls thousands of times, but her movements held something else, a controlled grace that spoke of training far beyond janitorial work. At 34, she was lean and compact, her dark hair always pulled back in a simple ponytail beneath a faded baseball cap that bore the hospital's logo. Her brown eyes held a watchfulness that seemed out of place for someone whose job was to clean up after others, constantly scanning, assessing, cataloging details that most people would miss. Tonight, like every night, she wore the same uniform, navy blue scrubs, comfortable sneakers that made no sound on the polished floors, and a utility belt loaded with cleaning supplies. But those who looked closely might notice that her hands moved with the precision of someone who had once worked with much more delicate instruments than mops and disinfectant bottles. The emergency department was Maria's final stop each night, and she approached it with the same methodical care she brought to every task. Through the glass doors, she could see Dr. Elena Rodriguez finishing up with a patient, her movements quick and confident as she sutured a laceration. Maria had watched Dr. Rodriguez work hundreds of times, always from a distance, always invisible. The doctor was brilliant, one of the best trauma surgeons Maria had ever observed, and she had observed many. As Maria began her cleaning routine, she noticed details that the medical staff had long stopped seeing, the way the new security guard, Harrison, favored his left leg, probably an old injury that would slow him down in a crisis. The fact that the backup generator had been making a slight vibration for 3 days, indicating a bearing that would fail within the week. The subtle tells that distinguished real patients from potential threats, posture, eye movement, the way hands rested or fidgeted. These observations came automatically, involuntarily, like breathing. They were the product of training so intensive and specialized that it had become hardwired into her nervous system, training that officially had never existed, for operations that had never happened, in service of a country that had disavowed her when things went wrong. Maria Santos was not her real name. It was a carefully constructed identity, complete with employment history, references, and a backstory that could withstand casual investigation. The woman who had earned the call sign, Lifeline, during classified operations in Eastern Europe had died in a helicopter crash 8 years ago, according to official records. But that woman's skills, her ability to perform battlefield surgery under fire, to read tactical situations in seconds, to move through hostile territory like a ghost, those skills lived on in the quiet janitor who cleaned trauma rooms and listened to the stories whispered in hospital corridors. The irony wasn't lost on her. She had spent years saving lives in the most dangerous places on Earth, only to find herself saving lives again in the sterile safety of a Chicago hospital. But here, her healing came through different means, ensuring that operating rooms were spotless, that equipment was properly sterilized, that the environment itself contributed to patient survival. It was honest work, invisible work, and it had given her something she'd never had in her previous life, peace. The patients who passed through St. Mary's emergency department came from every walk of life. Gang members with gunshot wounds lay next to suburban mothers with kitchen accidents. Homeless veterans battled infections while executives recovered from heart attacks. Maria had cleaned blood from the floors where all of them had bled, and she had learned to see past the circumstances that brought them here to the fundamental humanity they shared. Sometimes, late at night when the department was quiet, she would catch herself studying medical procedures with an intensity that went beyond casual interest. Her hands would move unconsciously, mimicking the motions she observed, muscle memory surfacing from operations where she had worked to save teammates under enemy fire. Dr. Rodriguez had noticed once, commenting that Maria seemed to have an unusual understanding of medical procedures for a janitor. Maria had deflected with a smile and a story about growing up in a family of nurses. The truth was more complicated. Maria had been a special forces medic before she had been anything else, trained to provide advanced trauma care in conditions that would challenge seasoned emergency room doctors. She could perform field surgery with a knife and dental floss, set broken bones with improvised splints, and keep someone alive with whatever materials were at hand. These skills had made her invaluable to her unit, earning her the call sign, Lifeline, and a reputation for bringing everyone home alive. But that life had ended abruptly when Operation Silent Shield went sideways. Her team had been betrayed, sold out to enemy forces by someone in their own command structure. Good soldiers had died because of that betrayal, and Maria had been forced to disappear to avoid joining them. The official story was that Sergeant Maria Vasquez had died in a helicopter crash during a training exercise. The unofficial truth was that she had been marked for elimination by the same forces that had destroyed her team. Now, as she cleaned the emergency department that had become her world, Maria allowed herself to believe that the past had finally stayed buried. 8 years was a long time. People forgot. Files got archived. The wars that had shaped her had given way to new conflicts, new secrets, new betrayals. She had built a life here. Not glamorous, not exciting, but hers. She finished cleaning the trauma bays and moved toward the supply closet to restock her cart. The night was quiet, peaceful in the way that hospital nights could be when no major emergencies were unfolding. Dr. Rodriguez was finishing her paperwork. The nurses were checking on patients. The security guard was making his rounds. Everything was normal, routine, safe. Maria had no way of knowing that 3 blocks away, a black SUV was pulling into the hospital parking lot. She couldn't see the men inside, checking their weapons, reviewing building schematics, or confirming the identity of their primary target. She was unaware that the peaceful life she had built was about to collide with the violent past she had tried so hard to leave behind. As she loaded fresh towels into her cart, Maria felt a familiar unease, the same sensation that had kept her alive through dozens of missions in hostile territory. It was subtle, barely perceptible, but unmistakable, the feeling of being watched, of danger approaching like a storm front on a clear horizon. She paused, listening to the familiar sounds of the hospital at night. Everything seemed normal, but her instincts, honed by years of training and survival, told her otherwise. Something was wrong. Something was coming. And in that moment, Maria Santos, the invisible janitor, began the transformation back into Lifeline, the soldier who had never learned how to leave anyone behind. The unease followed Maria through the remainder of her shift like a shadow she couldn't shake. She had learned long ago to trust her instincts. They had kept her alive in places where trusting the wrong person or missing the wrong signal meant death. But 8 years of peaceful routine had dulled the sharp edge of constant vigilance, and she found herself questioning whether her paranoia was justified or simply the ghost of a life she'd tried to forget. At 3:17 a.m. That question was answered in the most dramatic way possible. Maria was restocking medical supplies in Trauma Bay 3 when she heard Dr. Rodriguez's sharp intake of breath from the neighboring bay. Through the thin partition, she could hear the doctor speaking in rapid, urgent Spanish to a patient who had just been brought in by ambulance. The words were familiar to Maria, not just the language, but the specific medical terminology that Dr. Rodriguez was using to describe what appeared to be a gunshot wound. Entry wound consistent with high-velocity rifle round, Dr. Rodriguez was saying to the attending nurse. Trajectory suggests the shooter was positioned at elevation, probably a rooftop. This wasn't random street violence. Maria's hands stilled on the gauze packages she was organizing. High-velocity rifle round. Elevated position. The clinical description triggered memories she had worked hard to suppress. Memories of treating similar wounds in urban combat zones, of tracking sniper positions, of the way professional killers worked. She moved closer to the partition, her cleaning forgotten. Through the gap in the curtain, she could see the patient, a man in his 40s, Hispanic, wearing clothes that suggested he was neither wealthy nor poor. But it was his hands that caught Maria's attention, scarred, calloused in specific ways that spoke of weapons training and hard living. His tattoos were partially visible beneath the blood-soaked clothing, and Maria recognized military unit insignia mixed with symbols she had learned to read during her time in special operations. This wasn't a random victim. This was a soldier, or former soldier, and someone had tried very hard to kill him. "Doctor," the patient wheezed, grabbing Dr. Rodriguez's wrist with surprising strength. "They're coming tonight. The hospital, not safe." Dar. Rodriguez tried to calm him, assuming he was delirious from blood loss and trauma. But Maria heard something in his voice that the doctor missed, the clarity of someone delivering a warning, not the rambling of someone in shock. "Sir, you need to stay calm," Dr. Rodriguez said, preparing a sedative. "You're safe now. You're in the hospital." "No," the man insisted, his voice growing stronger despite his injuries. "They followed me here. They know I came here. They'll come, for her." "For who?" Dr. Rodriguez asked, but the man was losing consciousness, the combination of blood loss and medication taking hold. Maria's blood went cold. The timing was too convenient. Too precise. A former soldier showing up at her hospital with a sniper wound. Talking about people coming for her. In her previous life, she would have called it actionable intelligence. In her current life, she called it a death sentence, arriving right on schedule. She slipped back into the supply closet and activated the emergency protocols she had hoped never to use. Hidden behind a false panel in the cleaning cart was a secure satellite phone, ancient by current standards, but still functional. She powered it up and sent a single coded message to a number she had memorized but never called. "Lifeline to Ghost. Package compromised. Immediate extraction required." The response came back within 30 seconds. "Ghost to Lifeline. Negative on extraction. Too hot. Hunker down and wait for all clear." Maria stared at the phone's small screen, processing the implications. If Ghost, Tommy Martinez, her former teammate and the only person who knew she was alive, was telling her that extraction was impossible, then whatever was coming was bigger than a simple assassination attempt. This was a full-scale operation. She deleted the messages and returned the phone to its hiding place, her mind already shifting into tactical mode. The hospital had approximately 300 people inside at this hour, patients, staff, security, and visitors. The building had multiple entry points, but the emergency department was the most vulnerable. If someone wanted to infiltrate St. Mary's while maintaining plausible cover, they would come through the ER. Maria began moving through the department with new purpose, ostensibly continuing her cleaning routine but actually conducting a security assessment. The emergency department had two main entrances, the public entrance through the lobby and the ambulance bay where emergency vehicles delivered patients. Both were monitored by security cameras and had card access controls, but neither would stop a determined professional. The current security staff consisted of Bob Harrison, the overweight guard she had observed earlier, and Janet Mills, a capable but small woman whose primary experience was dealing with unruly visitors rather than armed intruders. The hospital's main security office was on the ground floor, but the emergency department relied on local presence rather than central monitoring. As she worked, Maria found herself cataloging potential weapons and defensive positions with the automatic efficiency of her old training. Medical scissors could serve as improvised knives. Oxygen tanks could be weaponized. The heavy crash carts could provide mobile cover. The pharmaceutical lockup contained sedatives that could incapacitate an attacker if properly administered. But more than weapons, she was thinking about the people she would need to protect. Dr. Rodriguez was brilliant and decisive, but she had no tactical training. The nurses were competent medical professionals, but they weren't prepared for violence. The patients in the emergency department included an elderly man with chest pain, a teenage girl with a broken arm, and 3 other individuals in various stages of treatment. At 4:23 a.m. Maria's preparations were interrupted by the arrival of another ambulance. She watched through the windows as paramedics unloaded a patient who appeared to be unconscious. But something about the scene felt wrong. The paramedics' movements were too coordinated. Too military. And the patient on the stretcher was positioned in a way that suggested he was ready to move quickly if necessary. Maria grabbed her radio and switched to the hospital's internal frequency. Security to emergency. This is maintenance. I need someone to verify the ambulance that just arrived, license plate and crew identification. Bob Harrison's voice crackled back through the radio. Maintenance, this is security. Why are you requesting verification on a medical transport? Just humor me, Maria replied, knowing she couldn't explain her suspicions without revealing her background. A few minutes later, Harrison's voice returned, but now it carried a note of concern. Maintenance, we have a problem. That ambulance isn't in our system. The license plate comes back to a vehicle that was reported stolen 3 hours ago. Maria's suspicions crystallized into certainty. The wounded soldier hadn't been followed to the hospital. He had been chased here, probably as part of a larger plan to flush out whoever he was trying to warn. And now the hunters had arrived, disguised as the very people the hospital was designed to trust. She moved quickly to the nurse's station and caught Dr. Rodriguez's attention. Doctor, I need you to listen carefully and not ask questions. That ambulance crew that just arrived, they're not real paramedics. You need to initiate a lockdown immediately. Dr. Rodriguez looked at her with confusion and growing alarm. Maria, what are you talking about? How would you know? Because I've seen this before, Maria said quietly. Please trust me. Lock down the department and get everyone away from the main entrances. Before Dr. Rodriguez could respond, the lights in the emergency department suddenly cut out, plunging the area into darkness except for the pale glow of emergency lighting. In that moment, Maria heard the sound that confirmed her worst fears, the distinctive click of weapons being readied, echoing from multiple positions around the department. The hunt had begun. The emergency lighting cast everything in an eerie red glow that transformed the familiar hospital corridors into something from a nightmare. Maria's training kicked in immediately, her body moving with muscle memory that had been dormant for 8 years but never forgotten. She dropped to a crouch behind the nurse's station, pulling Dr. Rodriguez down with her just as the first gunshots shattered the silence. Stay down and don't move, Maria whispered to the terrified doctor, her voice carrying an authority that Dr. Rodriguez had never heard from the quiet janitor. They're professionals. They know exactly what they're doing. Through the glass doors of the emergency department, Maria could see muzzle flashes strobing in the darkness of the main lobby. The fake paramedics had shed their medical disguises and were now moving through the hospital with military precision, their weapons sweeping in coordinated patterns that spoke of extensive tactical training. Maria counted at least 6 shooters, possibly more. They wore black tactical gear and moved with the fluid coordination of a unit that had worked together before. This wasn't a random attack or a desperate robbery gone wrong. This was a professional operation with specific objectives. Maria, Dr. Rodriguez whispered, her voice shaking. What's happening? Who are these people? People who shouldn't be here, Maria replied, her eyes tracking the movements of the gunmen through the red-tinted darkness. And they're looking for someone specific. The wounded soldier from earlier had been right. They had followed him here. But Maria was beginning to suspect that he hadn't been the primary target. He had been bait, designed to draw someone else into the open. Someone who had been invisible for 8 years but whose skills would be unmistakable once revealed. One of the gunmen approached the nurse's station, his weapon raised and ready. Maria could see his face clearly now. Young, maybe late 20s, with the cold eyes of someone who had killed before and would kill again without hesitation. He was scanning the area methodically, looking for targets or threats. Maria made a split-second decision that would change everything. As the gunman rounded the corner of the nurse's station, she moved with lightning speed, grabbing a medical cart and shoving it directly into his path. He stumbled, momentarily off balance, and Maria used that instant to disarm him with a move that was pure special forces, a precise strike to his wrist that caused him to drop his weapon, followed by a chokehold that left him unconscious in less than 10 seconds. Dr. Rodriguez stared in shock as Maria quickly searched the unconscious gunman, removing his radio, backup weapon, and tactical gear with the efficiency of someone who had done this many times before. "Jesus Christ," Dr. Rodriguez breathed. "Who are you right now?" "I'm someone trying to keep you alive," Maria replied, checking the gunman's radio for intelligence. The chatter she heard confirmed her worst fears. This was a multi-team operation with specific objectives and extraction plans. "Target confirmed in the building," a voice crackled through the radio. "Lifeline is active." "Repeat, lifeline is active." Maria's blood went cold. They knew her call sign. They knew exactly who they were hunting. She grabbed Dr. Rodriguez by the arm and pulled her toward the medical supply room. "We need to get the patients and staff to safety." "How many people are in the department right now?" 8 patients. 6 staff members, Dr. Rodriguez replied automatically, her medical training helping her function despite the terror. "Maria, I don't understand what's happening." "I'll explain later. Right now, we need to evacuate everyone to the most secure area of the hospital." "Where's the safest place?" Dr. Rodriguez thought quickly. "The surgical suite on the 3rd floor. It's reinforced, has its own security systems, and there's only one way in." "Good. We're going to move everyone there. But we need to do it without being detected." Maria checked the unconscious gunman's weapon, a military-grade assault rifle with modifications that weren't available to civilians. "How well do you know the hospital's layout?" "Better than anyone. I've worked here for 6 years. Service corridors, maintenance passages, ways to move people without using the main hallways." Dr. Rodriguez nodded slowly, understanding dawning in her eyes. "There's a freight elevator that connects to the service corridors. It goes directly to the surgical floor." Maria smiled grimly. "Perfect. Here's what we're going to do." Over the next 20 minutes, Maria orchestrated an evacuation that would have impressed her old Special Forces instructors. Using Dr. Rodriguez's knowledge of the hospital and her own tactical expertise, they moved the patients and staff through a maze of service corridors and maintenance passages, avoiding the gunmen who were systematically searching the main areas of the hospital. The elderly man with chest pain was transported on a gurney, with Maria and a nurse working together to keep his 4 lines stable during the movement. The teenage girl with the broken arm helped support another patient who was too weak to walk alone. Dr. Rodriguez led the group, using her medical authority to keep everyone calm and focused. But as they reached the freight elevator, Maria heard something that made her stomach drop, the distinctive sound of helicopters approaching the hospital. She grabbed the radio she had taken from the unconscious gunman and listened to the tactical chatter. "Overwatch is in position," a voice reported. "All exits are covered. No one gets out until the primary objective is achieved." "Copy that," came the response. "Continue sweep of floors 1 through 5. Target is contained but not secured." Maria realized that the situation had just become exponentially more dangerous. This wasn't just a hit squad. It was a full-scale military operation, with air support and perimeter control. Someone had committed serious resources to finding her, which meant that whatever she knew or represented was worth killing dozens of innocent people to obtain. As the freight elevator rose toward the surgical floor, Maria made a decision that went against every instinct that had kept her alive for the past 8 years. Instead of continuing to hide, instead of trying to escape, she was going to fight back. Too many innocent people were in danger, and she was the only one with the skills to protect them. "Dr. Rodriguez," she said quietly as the elevator climbed, "once we get everyone secured, I need you to do exactly what I tell you. Can you handle that?" The doctor looked at her with a mixture of fear and determination. Maria, whoever you really are, these people came here because of you, didn't they? Maria nodded. Yes. And I'm going to make sure they regret it. The elevator reached the third floor, and Maria began the process of transforming from invisible janitor to the warrior she had once been. The hospital had become a battlefield, and Lifeline was about to remind everyone why that call sign had once struck fear into the hearts of America's enemies. But first, she had to make sure that the innocent people under her protection would survive what was coming next. The surgical suite on the third floor of St. Mary's Hospital had been designed as a sterile sanctuary where life and death decisions were made with precision and skill. Tonight, it would serve a different purpose, as a fortress where a former Special Forces medic would make her last stand against an enemy that had hunted her across 8 years and half a continent. Maria moved through the surgical suite with the confidence of someone who belonged there, quickly assessing the space for defensive advantages. The reinforced doors could be secured from the inside. The surgical instruments could serve as weapons if necessary. Most importantly, the suite had its own communication system that bypassed the hospital's main network. "Everyone stay calm and quiet," Maria announced to the group of patients and staff she had evacuated. "We're going to be here for a while. But you're safe as long as you follow my instructions." Dr. Rodriguez pulled Maria aside, her voice urgent but controlled. "I need answers right now. Those men downstairs, they're not random criminals. They knew your name, your call sign. And you handled that gunman like you'd done it 1,000 times before." Maria looked at the doctor for a long moment, weighing how much truth she could reveal without putting everyone in greater danger. "My real name is Maria Vasquez. 8 years ago, I was a Special Forces medic with the 75th Ranger Regiment. My call sign was Lifeline. Officially, I died in a helicopter crash during a training exercise. Unofficially, I was marked for elimination because I knew too much about operations that were supposed to stay buried." Dr. Rodriguez processed this information with the same analytical precision she brought to medical diagnosis. "And now they found you. Not just found me. They've committed serious resources to eliminating me, military contractors, air support, perimeter control. This isn't about revenge or tying up loose ends. This is about something bigger." Before Dr. Rodriguez could respond, the surgical suite's communication system crackled to life. A voice that Maria recognized with a chill of dread filled the room. "Maria Vasquez, call sign Lifeline. This is Colonel David Kane. I know you can hear me." Maria's hands clenched into fists. "Kane." The officer who had betrayed Operation Silent Shield, who had sold out her team for career advancement and classified information, the man she had thought was dead. "You've caused me considerable inconvenience over the years," Kane continued, his voice carrying the smooth confidence of someone who believed he held all the advantages. "But tonight that ends. You have something I need. And I have something you care about, innocent lives." Maria moved to the communication panel and keyed the microphone. "Kane, I should have known you were too much of a coward to die with the rest of the team you betrayed. Ah, there's the Maria I remember. Always so direct. So, moral. It was that inflexibility that made you a liability then, and it's what's going to get you killed now. What do you want?" "You know what I want. The files from Operation Silent Shield. The evidence you collected before everything went sideways. I know you didn't die in that helicopter crash. You're too stubborn to die that easily. And I know you kept insurance, documentation that could implicate certain individuals and activities that were necessary for national security." Maria felt a cold realization settle over her. The files, encrypted drives containing evidence of Kane's betrayal, records of illegal operations, financial transactions that proved the scope of the corruption within their command structure. She had hidden them years ago as insurance, never imagining they would become the focus of a full-scale military operation. "I don't have any files," she lied smoothly. Kane's laughter echoed through the surgical suite. "Maria, we both know that's not true. Sergeant Tommy Martinez was quite informative before he died. He told us about your insurance policy, about the dead man switch you set up to release everything if something happened to you. Maria's world tilted. Tommy was dead. Her last link to her former life, the only person who knew she was alive, had been murdered by the same man who had destroyed her team 8 years ago. When? She asked quietly. 3 days ago. He lasted longer than expected. Rangers are tough that way. But eventually, everyone breaks. He told us about your little hideout. About the hospital where you've been playing janitor. About the encrypted files you've been keeping as insurance. Dr. Rodriguez watched Maria's face transform, seeing something cold and dangerous replace the controlled calm that had characterized her actions so far. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was personal. Here's my offer, Kane continued. You give me the location of those files, and I'll make sure the hospital staff and patients survive this encounter. You try to be a hero, and I'll turn this place into a war zone. My men have already secured the building. There's no escape. No rescue coming. Just you, me, and a choice. Maria looked around the surgical suite at the faces of the people she had sworn to protect. Dr. Rodriguez, whose only crime had been working the night shift, the elderly man with chest pain, who reminded her of her grandfather, the teenage girl with the broken arm, who couldn't be more than 17. I need time to think, she said into the microphone. You have 10 minutes. After that, I start killing hostages. The communication went dead, leaving the surgical suite in tense silence. Maria stood motionless for a moment, her mind racing through tactical options and strategic possibilities. Everyone in the room was looking at her, waiting for her to somehow solve an impossible situation. Dr. Rodriguez approached her cautiously. Maria, what are these files? What's so important that someone would do all this? Evidence of war crimes, Maria replied simply. Proof that Kane and others in our command structure were running illegal operations, selling weapons to enemies, getting American soldiers killed for profit. The files could bring down careers and administrations. Maybe even prevent future operations like the one that killed my team. And you've been keeping them secret for 8 years. As insurance. If Kane or his people ever found me, the files would be automatically released to journalists and congressional oversight committees. It was supposed to keep me safe. Dr. Rodriguez nodded slowly. But now he's calling your bluff. No, Maria said, moving to one of the surgical instrument trays and selecting a scalpel with practiced precision. He just made the mistake of thinking I was bluffing. She turned to face the group, and for the first time since the crisis began, she allowed them to see exactly who she really was, not Maria Santos the janitor, but Lifeline, the soldier who had earned her call sign by never losing a patient, never leaving anyone behind, and never backing down from a fight. Dr. Rodriguez, I need you to prepare the surgical suite for emergency procedures. We're going to have casualties before this is over. What are you going to do? Maria checked the scalpel's edge with the automatic precision of someone who had used such instruments to save lives, and, when necessary, to take them. I'm going to remind Colonel Kane why they called me Lifeline, and why that was the last name his enemies ever heard. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The 10 minutes that Kane had given her felt both eternal and instantaneous. Maria used every second to transform the surgical suite into something that would have made her old instructors proud, a defensive position that maximized her advantages while minimizing the enemy's options for assault. Working with Dr. Rodriguez, she repositioned the surgical tables to create cover and clear fields of fire. The elderly patient with chest pain was moved to the safest corner of the suite, his 4 lines carefully maintained by one of the nurses who had found her courage in the crisis. The teenage girl with the broken arm was helping to organize medical supplies, her fear replaced by determination to be useful. Maria, Dr. Rodriguez said quietly as they worked. If these files are so important, why don't you just give him what he wants? Maybe he'll let everyone go. Maria paused in her preparation, looking at the doctor with eyes that held 8 years of hard-earned wisdom. Because Kane never lets anyone go. He didn't become a colonel by leaving loose ends alive. The moment I give him those files, everyone in this room becomes a liability. She moved to the surgical suite's computer terminal and began accessing systems with a familiarity that surprised Dr. Rodriguez. Maria's fingers flew across the keyboard, bypassing security protocols with techniques that were definitely not part of janitor training. What are you doing? Evening the odds, Maria replied, accessing the hospital's building management system. Kane thinks he has all the advantages, numbers, weapons, air support, but he's fighting on my turf now. The hospital's environmental controls came online under Maria's command. She began systematically shutting down elevators, sealing fire doors, and redirecting airflow patterns in ways that would confuse and disorient anyone trying to navigate the building. 8 years of working in St. Mary's had given her an intimate knowledge of every system, every shortcut, every vulnerability. More importantly, she activated the hospital's emergency medical protocols, sending automatic distress signals to police, fire, and federal agencies. Kane might have the building surrounded, but he couldn't control every radio frequency or block every emergency transmission. The communication system crackled back to life exactly 10 minutes after Kane's ultimatum had begun. Time's up, Maria. I hope you've made the right choice. Maria keyed the microphone, her voice carrying a calm authority that made everyone in the surgical suite stand a little straighter. Kane, I've got a counteroffer for you. I'm listening. You and your men leave the hospital immediately. Take your helicopters, your tactical gear, and your delusions of competence, and disappear. In exchange, I won't kill every last one of you. The silence that followed stretched for nearly 30 seconds before Kane's laughter filled the room. Maria, you always did have more courage than sense. But you're outnumbered 20 to 1, trapped in a room with civilians, and facing professional soldiers with military-grade equipment. 20 to 1. Maria's voice carried a note of amusement that chilled everyone who heard it. Kane, you brought 20 men to kill one janitor. I'm almost flattered. Give me the location of the files, or I start executing hostages. The files are in a safety deposit box in Geneva, Switzerland. The key is hidden in my apartment. But here's the thing, Kane. Even if you get them, you'll never make it out of Chicago alive. Why is that? Maria smiled, and Dr. Rodriguez saw something in that expression that reminded her why this woman had once been considered one of the military's most dangerous operators. Because while you've been hunting me, I've been documenting you. Every communication you've made tonight, every tactical decision, every violation of federal law, it's all been recorded and transmitted to some very interested parties. This was partially true. Maria had indeed been recording Kane's communications and transmitting them through encrypted channels. But the real trap she was setting was far more subtle, and infinitely more dangerous. You're bluffing. Am I? Check your secure communications, Kane. I think you'll find some very interesting messages waiting for you. The hunt began in the east wing of the hospital, where 2 of Kane's men were sweeping patient rooms, expecting to find frightened civilians or at worst a security guard with a flashlight. What they found instead was a burst of movement from above, as Maria dropped silently from an overhead duct, incapacitating the first man with a chokehold and using his own suppressed pistol to shoot the second before he could react. She retrieved their radios, using them to feed disinformation to the rest of Kane's team. False reports of movement in other wings, phantom sightings in stairwells, anything to slow them down, confuse them, and isolate them. One by one, she took them apart. In the ICU, she short-circuited the lights to create darkness, then used the heart monitor's alarm tones to mask her footsteps as she moved. She neutralized another pair of gunmen with surgical precision, literally, by luring them into a supply room and using anesthetic gas to render them unconscious. In the radiology department, she used lead-lined walls to shield her movement from heat-sensing drones, allowing her to ambush another operative who thought he had the advantage of technology. She took his night vision gear and used it to move more efficiently through the blackout zones she had created earlier. All across the hospital, Kane's men were falling. Not in dramatic firefights or explosive encounters, but in silence, in the cold, clinical efficiency of a former Special Forces medic who knew how to stop a heart as easily as she once restarted them. Kane's voice grew more agitated on the open channels. "We're losing people. I want sweep teams on every floor. Find her. Now." But the sweep teams never reassembled. Maria had sabotaged the elevators, rerouted stairwell access, and used magnetic door locks to herd her enemies into positions of maximum vulnerability. She wasn't just fighting in the hospital. She had become the hospital. An invisible force of retribution moving through the building she knew better than her own heartbeat. And then finally, she came for Kane. He was in the administrative wing, surrounded by the last of his men, trying to establish an extraction route through the roof as federal agents began converging on the perimeter. His calm had eroded, replaced by the barely contained rage of a man who realized his empire of secrets was collapsing. "Vasquez," he shouted into the radio. "This ends tonight." Maria responded by cutting power to the administrative wing entirely, plunging it into total darkness. When the emergency lights finally came on, she was standing at the end of the hallway. Alone. Armed. Unbroken. Kane raised his weapon, but Maria was faster. The hallway erupted into gunfire as she moved like a ghost through the shadows, taking down his last two bodyguards with lethal precision. Kane managed to wound her, a grazing shot to the arm. But Maria kept coming, closing the distance until it was just the two of them, face to face. They fought in silence, no dramatic speeches, no declarations of vengeance. Just two soldiers with too much blood between them. Kane was strong, experienced, and ruthless. But Maria was something else. She was precise. She was focused. And she had spent 8 years preparing for this moment. In the end, she used the same scalpel she'd taken from the surgical suite, driving it into Kane's thigh to drop him, then using his own weapon to deliver the final shot. He died without ceremony. Without redemption. Just a traitor on a hospital floor, surrounded by the consequences of his greed. By the time federal agents breached the building, Maria was waiting in the surgical suite, her wounds bandaged, her identity ready to be reclaimed. Dr. Rodriguez met her with a stunned expression. "Is it over?" Maria nodded. "For now." In the weeks that followed, the files from Operation Silent Shield were released. Congressional hearings were held. Careers ended. Reforms were promised. Maria Vasquez didn't attend any of it. She disappeared again, just as quietly as she had come. But the legend remained. At St. Mary's General Hospital, people still talk about the night the janitor saved everyone. They say she vanished afterward. Some think she died. Others believe she's out there somewhere, watching. Waiting. Ready to answer the call. Because that's what Lifeline does. She saves lives. No matter the cost.